Our final speaker for the evening was the youngest qualified speaker that District 12 has ever had. And he's also one of the most impressive. Now, historically, everyone knows that when you go to school, as soon as you come back in September, after summer vacation, they say, quick, write your essay on what I did this summer. Well, that's great. But sometimes we need to learn instead, and particularly parents need to learn, but everybody needs to learn, what did you do in school? I remember when I came home from college one day, my dad said, what did you learn in school? I said, I learned how to juggle. And he said, terrific, juggle for me. Now I can see where my money is going. Well, Nathan's son here is going to tell us where his tuition money is going because he's going to talk to us about Vanderbilt. Ladies and gentlemen, Nathan's son.
Thank you. Would be all right if you turned off the projector? Thanks. So hello, everyone. This is precisely how I choose to spend my evenings. And this is the most enjoyable way in my mind. And basically, it's a small, intimate gathering, some of my closest friends. Now, if for whatever reason, some catastrophic mistake occurs while I'm giving this speech, I'd just like to remind you of the words of Mrs. Jameson. Be kind. You never know what someone is going through. I've been going through a lot this summer, so there it is. In this speech, I'd like to go over very briefly what I've done with Toastmasters, not only in high school, but also in college as well. And then also touch on my time at Vanderbilt, the first year that I've been there ever since I transferred. So starting off, many years back, Mr. Jameson helped set up a new gavel club in the Riverside area. And I was one of those initial people who joined. I'm not entirely sure if it's still up or if it exists at all, but in the time that it did exist, it was truly one of the best experiences that I've ever had for public speaking. Every single week, we'd show up, we'd give some sort of random impromptu speech, and then we'd also give a speech that we prepared. And this was terrific for me because it helped to not only hone my skills in public speaking, but also just dealing and interacting with people socially. And this is especially important for me because I've been homeschooled, not just for high school, not just for middle school, but pretty much for my entire formative years prior to going off to college. And I don't know about you, but in homeschooling circles, there's always this trope that homeschoolers are socially awkward. They don't know how to speak to people. They're very shy. They don't do anything with other people, right? Like I'm here with you, interacting with other people. And that's always just been the stereotypical view that people have had of homeschoolers. And so being able to go to Toastmasters on a weekly basis, interact with other people, and learn how to speak professionally, how to speak in a public setting, that's just been an invaluable experience for me. And it's helped not just academically in college, it's helped when I've gone to Vanderbilt, it's helped when I'm giving just random speeches to find folks like you. Whenever I have these opportunities, these speech contests, these speech events that I have to go to, it's been great for that. So I've been doing Gavel Club, and fast forward to my time in college, I decided to take a few years, not off of college, but just at a community college. And I'm not sure if you guys remember this, but from roughly 2021 to 2022 especially, there was like this big event, this catastrophe that everyone was talking about, right? And so that kind of caused a little bit of apprehension for me. So I thought, why don't I just stay at home, do community college, and then if all goes well, I'll transfer, right? And so during that time, I still continued with Toastmasters. I still continued to hone my speaking ability. And during that time, I had the great opportunity of basically applying to be a qualified speaker. I had to deliver a speech about the impact of COVID and how it affected online learning for our students. because that was such a huge deal. And just like our former speaker brought up, there's a huge advantage to be conferred whenever people have the ability to go online, as opposed to a person who has very spotty internet access where he can't read the material, he can't communicate with his teachers on Zoom. That's just a huge disparity. And that's going to be amplified for the coming years. Kids who have missed a grade or two in school because of COVID, they're going to have to deal with those effects all the way through their high school careers, into college, and they may not ever get back that time that they lost. So that's especially important to me. And it's something that I felt personally during COVID as a student who was going to school and who had to deal with this sort of issue. So that's what I gave my speech about. And that was basically the 2 years that I spent at community college. I went to Mount San Antonio College. I'm not sure if anyone knows of that place. It's an excellent school, offers excellent transfer opportunities. As long as you put in the good work and as long as you do what you're supposed to do, I think you can get excellent results in terms of transferring. So that was high school, Mount Sac Community College, and then Vanderbilt. So towards the end of my second year, I had already put in the applications to transfer. I had applied to quite a few schools, and I honestly was not even sure whether or not I was going to get in, right? To be perfectly honest, I put in the work. I got good grades. I did extracurricular stuff, but you never really can tell exactly what happens with these admissions processes. But thankfully, all went well. I got into Vanderbilt, and I've been there for the past year. It's been an excellent opportunity for me. And one of the things that I believe helped the most was Toastmasters, was this public speaking experience. And the funny thing about Vanderbilt is they try to put an emphasis on small class sizes. So you could literally be in a class where there's 5 people and the professor, and that's it. So you really have the opportunity to speak to your peers and to have that time in the class to voice your own opinions and interact with the professors because the class sizes are so small. Right? If it's an auditorium of, say, 1,000 people, you could just be a faceless person out there in the ether and nobody even knows who you are, and the professor doesn't really care, right? But with this experience of having small class sizes, I found that I had the opportunity to actually speak consistently. And Toastmasters helped a lot with that. Being able to articulate whatever it is you're thinking, to say, look, this is what I'm trying to tell and communicate to my audience, and how do I put it into words? How do I speak to people so that they understand? Because ultimately, in my experience, if the audience doesn't understand, it's your fault. You didn't do a good enough job of articulating and constructing your ideas so that they're able to receive it. And it varies, of course. There are different audiences that you encounter. Some may be college experience. They might be in an academic setting. And you may also be speaking to people who perhaps are in a different sort of career field. They may not have college experience. They may be Toastmasters. They may be experienced speakers, right? Or they could be amateur speakers. Who knows? Right? And so being able to conform your speaking style to whatever the needs are of your audience is something that I learned through Toastmasters and that I've carried throughout my adult life. So now I've got one more year at Vanderbilt, hopefully. If all goes well, I've got one more year, and I'll be able to graduate in 2025. And I'm definitely looking forward to that. It's going to be a hard year, but we'll make it. We'll do well. All good things. And I'm very excited for that. So with the remaining time we have now, I'd like to open it up to questions. And it's not that the questions are sort of the tail end of the speech. I'd actually like to devote the majority of the time that I have to questions. That way I can sort of focus on whatever it is you guys are interested in. So by all means, we've got a relatively small audience here. So you guys have the floor. So whoever would like to ask a few questions, go ahead.
What's your major?
Political science.
Purpose of?
Law school at this point in time. I honestly have no idea like what will happen, but that is the plan at this point. Law school. Yeah. Because I enjoy reading about the law, and because, quite frankly, I'm not entirely sure what other field interests me more than this like intersection between politics, history, social sciences, philosophy, that sort of all gets incorporated into the profession of the law. So that's what I personally appealed to me about that. Yeah. Yes.
Something very valuable that you learned in your first year in Vanderbilt.
I'd say it comes down to doing the things you have to do when you have to do them. All right, some people are tempted, myself included, to put off the paper that's due or studying for the final that's going to be due in like 3 days. That's something you should not be doing. And I think that ultimately it has to be sort of a balance between enjoying your time there and then also studying. And I know that sounds exceptionally cliche, but it absolutely is true. There's times when you have to enjoy yourself, right? And then you just have to approach this whole situation with a mentality of, look, I'm going to be doing my work first, and then I'll enjoy myself afterwards. And you just got to be disciplined that way. What is that? I have 8 minutes?
There's three people with questions.
Oh, okay. Right. Forgot about that. The web audience. Yeah.
Hey, David Flores' name.
All right, David Flores.
Thank you, Nathan. Enjoyed your presentation. How would you have
Thank you.
How would you have compared your speaking skills to the other students? Did they show, was it obvious that they didn't belong to Toastmasters?
I'd say that you'd have to consider not only my time at Vanderbilt, but also at Mount Sac. And for those two, I'd say, obviously, you'll see that the people in Vanderbilt, they've been selected because of their good academics, because of the fact that they are capable students. And so, yeah, most of them are pretty good speakers. And quite frankly, if I didn't have that experience in Toastmasters, I think it would be severely at a deficit compared to everyone else. But because of Toastmasters, everything turned out well. And, not to brag or anything, but I think I'd rank top of the class or somewhere near the top for that. Sharon.
Hi, great speech.
Hi. Thank you.
Growing up, I read several books that really inspired me and really changed the trajectory of my worldview. The Robe is one of them. The Warrior Woman is another one. Right now, I'm really into Malcolm Gladwell. I love all his books. He's very inspiring. Do you have some authors that you've read that have just really kind of revolutionized your worldview?
Absolutely. Sharon, that is such an amazing question. I cannot praise that question enough. Because so much of our worldview is shaped by the information that we consume. And for the longest time in human history, that actually has been books. We didn't have videos, we didn't have internet, it was just books. And I like to think I've kept that tradition of learning from books. In terms of authors, C.S. Lewis cannot be beat, in my opinion, in terms of like a modern author that's accessible to everyday people. It's easy to read, easy to digest to a certain extent, right? His ideas do get more complex the deeper in you go. But C.S. Lewis, he covers pretty much all the important aspects of the humanities, whether it's religion, history, politics. He's got at least a couple writings throughout all of those issues. So C.S. Lewis for sure. In terms of just authors in general, it's so funny you brought this up because I was just thinking about, what sorts of literature do I truly enjoy? What do I love reading, right? And I would say just read throughout English history, like all of English literature. And I actually had this book. It was from Beowulf all the way up to, I believe, Byron. It was like Enlightenment period, somewhere around there. And it was just a whole breadth of English literature. And it was some of it fictional, some of it poetry, some of it history. It's all absolutely fantastic. And the reason I say English literature is because we speak English, we're English speakers, right? And I think it's important to understand that heritage. Longfellow is a very, very good poet. I was just thinking about a couple of his lines. From the Psalm of Life. How many of you know the Psalm of Life by Longfellow? No? Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. Okay, so amazing author. I just cannot praise his work enough. He actually wrote this poem, A Psalm of Life, and it was a poem written for himself. He didn't intend to publish it, and it was just about his own struggles, whether that was with depression, whether that was with his own personal psychological failings. And he wrote it for himself, to himself. intended solely to be read by himself, but thankfully it got published. And one of my favorite lines from this poem is, "In the world's broad field of battle, in the bivouac of life, be not like dumb driven cattle, be a hero in the strife." That is just the most beautiful concept ever. I mean, the world is so chaotic. There's so much stuff going on, and really do feel like just a tiny little ant, right, in the vast scheme of humanity throughout history. Just one person, what could I possibly do? But Longfellow is basically teaching us, look, be deliberate with your actions. Know what you want to do. Have a goal. Stick to it. And then actually fulfill that goal and do something. Don't be like dumb driven cattle where, oh, the world is just happening to me. I have no agency. I'm not doing anything. I'm not independently minded. No, stick to your plan. Have a plan, first of all, and be a hero in the strife. That's just beautiful. I recommend all of you read Longfellow. I recommend all of you just at least examine those ideas and hopefully take it to heart. So thank you, Sharon. Beautiful question. I love it. All right, Mr. Jameson.
First, you mentioned going into law.
Yeah.
Have you seen yourself someday as an elected politician?
Perhaps. I think that when it comes to planning out your life, I definitely stress the short to intermediate term. So that would be like anywhere from a year to 5 years, I'd say. After 10, it becomes a little bit spotty. Like it becomes more vague and generalized. Like, of course, I kind of have a plan, generally speaking, of what I'd like to do 50 years from now. But the circumstances of the world are so turbulent to the point where I don't know if it's realistic to plan out the specific details of your life 50 years from now. I just tend to focus on, okay, what can I immediately do in the short to intermediate term to assess my goals and to develop skills so I'm useful, right? And so going to college, 1 year from now, I plan on graduating with a decent grade. And that's kind of the short term. And then obviously that sort of work, a few internships, apply for graduate school, that sort of thing. But yes, I'm definitely interested in that. And I'd like to just take a brief moment. This is not a partisan idea that I'm conjecturing into this discussion, but truly, I love this country and I love America. And there's so much potential that we have as a country that, quite frankly, it's kind of a waste what we've been doing so far, just in the past couple of decades, right? You think about the fundamental principles that we need for a successful country, the fundamental elements, right? We have a large population. We have even energy independence, right? Who would have thought? We actually have enough oil. We don't need to rely on anybody. We can fund all of our needs in terms of energy, in terms of human capital, intellectual capital. There's so much good that we could do in this country to improve it and to bring it into a second golden age. And if I have the opportunity to be a politician, to facilitate that in some way, absolutely, I would do that. That's my answer. All right. Amanda White.
So you said you were homeschooled and that kind of changed your perspective. So if you were to go back or to talk to homeschool groups today, what would you change differently? When would you interject the Toastmaster ideas? How would you help those students that are going through that same perspective?
So just to clarify, you're asking me what I would change or whether or not I'm satisfied with currently my life as it has played out?
Well, a little bit about how it played out, but what would
Okay.
you change? How would you improve it? How would you use what you know to make it better for other people in that scenario?
Okay. Yeah, I personally try to ensure that homeschooling gets more access to these sorts of resources like Toastmasters. We actually got introduced by another homeschooling family in our cohort. So they told us about Toastmasters. They introduced us to Mr. Jameson. That's how we got that opportunity. If it were not for them, I don't think I would have had access to Toastmasters. I wouldn't have been able to take advantage of this opportunity. So I'd say just ensuring that more homeschoolers are aware of the resources that they have at their disposal, right? Toastmasters, it's open to anybody, right? You can just be a certain age, you can join a gavel club, right? Anybody can do it, any school, it doesn't matter. I also participated with Lions Club. That's another fantastic organization, and they did student speaker contests. So that's something that I participated in as well, and I just try to get the word out there. Yes. Michael Osier.
Oh, Nathan, to think we knew you when. So I know you got stuck on Longfellow, but how about the beat poets, especially Allen Ginsberg and Howell, which totally changed everything around censorship in the 50s and really changed every poet since then in the US has been totally affected by him. So Allen Ginsberg, Howell, I hope you've heard of it, the most famous of the beat poets. We also recommend Nelson Mandela's book, A Long Walk to Freedom, which really will change your life. That's all men. How about, someone like Brene Brown or famous thought Gertrude Stein, famous female thought leaders of the 20th century? We don't want you just reading the dead white men. That's my only thought on that. And by the way, I love going to Nashville. So last I checked, there's still a few distilleries very near the university. Corsairs downtown, Nelson Greenbrier, and of course, you're only 45 minutes from Jack Daniels. You better stop studying and take a few hours out to have a little sip of the good stuff from Tennessee whiskey. Thank you, Nathan.
Thanks, Mike. All I would say to that is, yes, it's very important to read the vast gamut of literature, but also understand how these people are affected by the world that they live in, right? What sorts of contemporary forces prompted them to write and think in those ways? So that's a very good point. In terms of other poets that I find to be quite important, Shelley's important. There was one very good bit of poetry by Richard Lovelace, whom I don't think anyone will have heard of because he wrote in the 16th century. He was a Cavalier poet, and it's just a fantastic poem. I don't have time to get into it, but definitely check out Richard Lovelace if you're interested. In terms of the microbreweries and the so-called fun things to do, I would say, Mike, do not let my calm intellectual demeanor fool you. I have certainly had a good time. I've had more than a good time, in fact. And I would say that's something that you kind of just have to be there to know about. So yeah, absolutely. Vanderbilt, whether that's Broadway or all the breweries that you can tour, or even just going to Gatlinburg, which is not Nashville, but a couple hours away. I'd say they're all very good opportunities. And yeah, pretty much the only thing that I lament is the fact that there's no skiing in the state. Like you have to go to West Virginia for that, and I'm big into skiing. So regrettably, it is what it is. But everything else is fantastic. But yeah, looking forward to winter. Hopefully it snows out there in Nashville. All right, any more questions? No more questions. My goodness. Anything? Nope. Okay. No more questions. Everything's good? All right, wonderful.
Thank you.
One more thing, I would like to urge all the people watching on Zoom, please come in person. It really is far more fun and far more interesting to actually interact with people, It's actually very, very different. You think it's the same, you can hear me, you can see me, but truly it isn't. So with that being said, Mr. Jameson. I can step back in. All right, thank you.